is early August 2022. And yeah, it is a beautiful summer day. Right now it is actually the middle point between the solstice and the equinox, which is an important seasonal marker for us. It means that on one hand, we're still enjoying the fullness of summer, but we're also turning our attention more and more to the coming of autumn. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing as we look towards autumn, and also a bit about some of the summer crops we're enjoying right now. So one thing we're going to be doing this week and in the coming weeks is harvesting potatoes. I think I probably talked in one of our earlier videos how potatoes did really well this year. I just want to show you a little bit. They grew, the plants certainly are like really nice and big on top. Now, digging potatoes, the trick is always not to puncture them with the digging fork, but just to show you, oh, look at these guys, they're so lovely. So this is our pink variety here. It's one of the special colored varieties that we grow. But these are just the plant pots here. Look at all of these. This is all from one potato, and I haven't even gotten them all yet. You don't have to dig potatoes right now. You could leave them in the ground longer. We are digging these out because we want to be able to have these skins dry out during the dry season. Also, in some cases, we need to get a second crop in before the fall. In this particular field, we're not planning to plant a second crop, but in our other potato field, we have to get those potatoes out ASAP so that we can plant daikon while it's still time. And I'll be talking about daikon some more in a minute. But just to give an idea of just how well these potatoes did, not even finished yet. And here's more, here's more. These little tiny ones aren't really edible, so we can just throw those aside. If we don't throw them aside, they will grow next year, and we're trying to grow a different crop. We actually have a joke here that Uno-san, the farm owner, likes to make. In Japanese, potato is jagaimo, and jama means to... Jagaimo is one word. The word jama, which sounds a little bit like jaga, means annoying. And so those little potatoes that stay in the field and grow the next year when you don't really want potatoes there anymore, she calls jamaimo. And so we don't want jamaimo, so we throw these little ones out of the field somewhere. All right, here we go. Look at all this. Okay, that's, oh, shoot, I poked one. Okay, these will be for lunch then. See what I mean about poking potatoes? Anyways, there might be some more in there that I can search for later, but look at all of that just from one seed potato that probably looked something like this. All right, so that is one thing we will be doing in the coming weeks, is getting the potatoes out of the field so that we can plant other crops. And one of the other crops that we need to plant is daikon. Now, in the fall, we plant a few hundred meters worth of daikon. I'm just going to show a field that we planted just yesterday. This field has a total of about 100, well, more than 100 meters of daikon row. So yesterday we just made the mounds and planted the seeds. We ran out of time before the end of the day, so we didn't manage to finish watering them in. We didn't manage to finish covering them with the floating row cover to keep off the insects, so we still need to do that. But here we have around 100 to 120 meters of daikon. Probably, if we calculate, like if every seed germinated, we would have around 1,000 daikon in this field. Realistically, not every seed's going to germinate, but that gives you an idea of how much daikon is potential from this one field. We have plans to plant a little bit more than this again next week in a different field, and that will give us our big daikon harvest going into the fall and the winter. So, having talked about potatoes and daikon, let's take a little walk nearby and look at some of the crops that we're harvesting more regularly right now. One thing that's doing well right now is the summer cabbages. These are those tender cabbage varieties that are good for salad, and they did really well this year. These guys right here, this whole row here, they all did really nicely. This one here is nice and firm, ready to harvest. If you grow cabbages in your garden, we know they're ready to harvest when they have this nice firmness to them. Now for these tender varieties, we can actually harvest them when they're a little bit more, not quite as firmly headed. We're actually finding that sometimes if they're too firmly headed, there might be a little tip burn inside. That's not true for all cabbages always, that's just this variety in this particular time. But we are super happy with how these guys are doing. So if you're in the box program, you might be seeing some of these in your box, not around this season. Two other things that we're harvesting these days are cucumbers and eggplants. Let's go talk about the cucumbers next. So cucumbers unfortunately did not do very well this year. Basically in the spring, when we would normally plant cucumbers, it was too cold for the ones that we did plant. And then the field where I should say the greenhouse rather, where we were going to plant more cucumbers, just stayed really wet really late, so we weren't able to plant as many plants as we would normally put in, which meant that what we did have didn't do well, and we didn't have as much as we should have. Now, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, we transplanted a new batch of cucumbers. These ones here, they are doing pretty well now. And so they're still in that phase where they're growing really lush and, they look all nice and fresh. Here you can see some cucumber fruits forming. I'll probably harvest this one tomorrow. Now, one thing that we will do, because these have just started producing over the last few weeks, we will try to side dress these with some kind of fertilizer, some kind of organic fertilizer in the next week or so. That just gives them the strength and the energy to keep on growing and producing, because theoretically we could still be harvesting from these guys in October. So they need to have the strength to keep going for August, September, kind of like 2.5 more months sort of a thing. And when we do that, what we'll just do is we'll lift up the mulch here and place the fertilizer kind of here in the roots. And you can actually see the roots growing right there on the surface, these little white roots there. I always like seeing the roots growing, that's always neat. So yeah, so we'll put the fertilizer like here in the root zone, and that will just give them some extra strength to keep going with. Okay, so that's cucumbers. Eggplants, unlike cucumbers, are going gangbusters. They're doing really well. Let's go take a look at some of them. I just harvested some eggplants this morning actually, so the big ones are already gone. But these are just dripping with fruit. So even though I already harvested today, just look at all these nice eggplant fruits here. They're just gorgeous and beautiful and shiny. All these ones through here. I probably could even have harvested more today, but our friends at Tama Organic Life in Vancouver are coming on Monday actually, so they'll be taking a lot of eggplants back to Vancouver with them. So if you're watching in the Lower Mainland, see if you can get yourself to Tama Organic Life next week and you'll be able to get our eggplants there. Now, two things I want to say about eggplants. In our last video, I talked a bit about eggplant pruning, how we kind of look for that two-branched nature of the plant and then take off the lower branches. That's one aspect of pruning eggplants. The other one is that we don't want the branches to get too full of fruit because then they can fall over and break. So what we actually do is, now there is a more technical way to do this. My lazy way is simply, if it looks like the branch is long enough, I just find the flower near the top of as far as I want the branch to go. And then I find one leaf above that, so that could be this leaf here, and then I'll cut or break the shoot after that. Now you might be saying, why do that? Aren't you gonna get less fruit that way? Sort of, yes, but eggplants are actually really strong. They're really good at making side shoots. And you know, there's all kinds of little buds down here that can turn into new branches and make new fruit. If we don't do this and we let the branch keep growing longer and longer, it can fall over and actually split and crack the plant. Or we could get strings and trellis them, but then that's a lot more work. And so our middle of the road option is prune them the way I just showed you there, and that way no one branch has more fruit than it can support. So that's one of the two things I wanted to tell you about eggplants. The other thing I wanted to talk about eggplants has more to do with how to eat them. Now, if you're used to having eggplants from the supermarket, you may have seen recipes where you need to salt the eggplants to kind of draw out that harshness. With these eggplants, you don't need to do that, partly because of the variety, and partly because we make sure to harvest them when they're young and they're still very tender and they don't have as much of that harshness to them. However, as we get into this season where we're, you know, halfway to the fall equinox, halfway from the summer solstice to the fall equinox, we're going to start having more of a fall feeling to a lot of crops. And so the eggplants are going to get, they're going to get older faster than they did earlier in the season. Therefore, one thing that can be good to do for the eating quality is to actually soak them in water briefly before you cook with them. I'm actually going to demonstrate that in just a minute. I'll wash my hands first, and then we'll get out a cutting board and knife and a bowl and show you how to do that. I'll rejoin you after I've washed my hands. So I was saying that it can be good to soak the eggplant in water briefly before you cook with them. Now, if you are totally fine with the way it tastes without doing that, it's your call, go for it. I've heard some people just like to grill them like whole, straight on the barbecue. I haven't tried it, but I've heard some people like it that way. Usually what we do though is when we're going to be eating the eggplants, we will cut them up. So take the top off here. And it doesn't really matter what size or shape you cut them, just that you cut them. So I'm going to do like this. I'm just cutting them in the size and shape I'm planning to cook them in. And these go in the water. Now you'll notice that they float. And so what you can do actually is when you finish putting them in the water, I'm going to cut up one more. When I finish getting everything in here, I'll probably actually just put a little plate on top and force them down. I only need to wait maybe 2 or 3 minutes, kind of a thing. After 2 or 3 minutes, you'll notice that the water goes a little bit brown. You can discard the water and then cook with them however you like. If the style of cooking you're doing is important that they be dry, you can pat them dry with a towel or something like this. For myself, I'm going to be making these into pasta sauce. I don't really mind if there's some extra water in there, and so I'll just put them straight in after I've drained off the excess water. This will just give a slightly more refined flavor. You'll get rid of like just that little bit of harshness that you can sometimes get with eggplants. But the nice thing is I don't need to salt them and leave them to sit for a long time or anything like this. So that is our tip for cooking with eggplants, and that's our segment for today. Thanks for joining us again, and we look forward to next time.